wa, konnichiwa, and yabaseo. Will here of the POLIT'AI CHI doing a week-long retrospective on some of the more insensitive things going on during Harvey, after Harvey, leading up to about last Friday night, including dumbass professors. Bear in mind all of their PhDs, even at the associate level, from U of Tampa. We'll get into that in a bit. Tasteless political cartoons, all political. You can go back in the 1890s, the Teapot Dome sort of style of political cartoons back then. Not to this level. Yeah, mocking the tragedy. The Charlie Hebdo, that'll lead up to the Polyrand. I'm going to go off in French. It's not going to be pretty. Don't worry, it's not me talking for a whole 15 minutes of slide. This is just a montage slideshow, the video highlights coming up. So, yeah, Politico used to be kind of respectable, still are, and then there's moments like that. Al Sharpton, the Rev, it's on the channel, on the OMSR YouTube channel, parent channel to this, the POLIT'AI CHI. You can see, in 2, 3, 4 years ago, that yours truly's been doing this. This guy was like more like a lot of the pundits there at MSNBC. There's a lot that's been going on this week. That being, what? Yeah, September 12th. Ooh, Hurricane Vladimir, yet another esoteric comment from the left. Alright, so with regard to, some little inset snippets of some context to provide, some of the, what was going on this week. Here's MSNBC and what they were worried about as Hurricane Irma was coming off of Cuba. This would be Friday night. Roll.
I'm Ali Velshi in for Brian Williams. Day 224 of the Trump administration brings new information about the Russia investment.
Yeah, so that guy was subbing in for, you can see the timestamp there, for Brian Williams. I still have respect for him, even though he was embellishing there. Lost him his gig at NBC Nightly News, but yeah, that's what they were concerned about. And when it comes to the weather, yours truly has a minor in meteorology, and I go back and forth from time to time, various sources. That's what centricity is all about, the Tai Chi symbol, yin and yang, balance. So what does Brian Norcross say? Paige and Jennifer Lawrence, more on that in a bit. Roll it.
All right, now on to the other side of the Atlantic. This is Hurricane Irma now, up to 115 mile an hour Category 3 hurricane. This is an exceptionally odd weather pattern that we have going. It's not impossible to have a hurricane like this, but the weather pattern surrounding it to drive it on across the Atlantic is a very unusual pattern. I'm going to really look at that.
Right. Unusual? Sure. Unheard of? No. Ooh, I'm Jennifer Lawrence. Mother Nature is very angry at Donald Trump. Really? Then, how do you explain it going into Cuba and it messing it up? Things as bad as they look could have been so much worse. The left of center and Hollywood just focus on what they do best with regard to Hollywood, and then Sharon coming out like everybody's got to, who is able to, bring in one particular person who was covered by DACA. Where were you, Cher, when the homeless veteran crisis was being reported on as it was increasing and increasing after all of the struggles in Iraq and Afghanistan? Just go back to your little bubble world, right? Because here's the truth as to what the explanation was as to why Irma went into Cuba again by the well-spoken and cerebral Brian Norcross. The weather channel, roll it.
A couple things happened that really helped us here. Not that this is going to be good. This is still going to be a statewide disaster. I don't think there's any question about that. But the two things that happened is, one is that for whatever reason, Irma dilly-dallied around by Cuba there, and that made the turn be a little bit late, and that allowed the dry air to get into it sooner. All this was supposed to happen where it was supposed to weaken, but the thought was that would happen farther north, and the reason it didn't happen farther north is because it got kind of stuck by Cuba for reasons I don't think we have any idea why.
All right, so this is kind of dragging on a little bit longer than I had hoped, so I would just say about the Charlie Hebdo, because you'll see it in its entirety coming up. But qu'est-ce que c'est votre problème, les hommes dans Paris? Pourquoi me le travail? Oh, Charlie Hebdo. Après une situation, le désastre au naturel, le sujet des humorous pour toi, faites attention! Vous chien, roughly translated, you dumbass, pardon my French. What is so funny about a natural disaster in America qu'on n'est jamais dans les États-Unis les hommes? Hein? Après la situation de Charlie Hebdo, la situation du terrorisme, hein? N'est jamais. Alright, thanks for watching. It would never happen here, roughly translated. Those sleepy eyes while you're out there, roll clips.
Welcome back to Hannity. The controversial French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo is causing outrage over its latest cover, depicting people who drowned in the floods from Hurricane Harvey as Nazis. The headline translates to, quote, God exists. He drowned all the neo-Nazis of Texas. Politico is also taking heat for running this cartoon depicting a Texan wearing the Confederate flag and mocking him for taking aid from the federal government. Joining us now with reaction is former Arkansas governor and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee. Thanks for being with us tonight. When you see these headlines and people doing these type of things, why do these publications print what many people feel and deem to be such offensive material? What good does it do to mock victims of Hurricane Harvey?
I guess it's, Kimberly, because so many people on the left just have a despicable view of other human beings. I don't know, how else can you describe something like this? I mean, it's one thing to pick on politicians, government officials. I get that. All of the people in public office ask for those things. They're fair game, even though some of it is ridiculous and even just plain silly. But to say that the people who are dying and who have already died in Houston are a bunch of Nazis, they're Hispanics, they're African Americans, but there's no color. These are just people who happen to be in harm's way, and it's really beneath the dignity of civilized people to somehow think that that's sporting to make fun of victims in a hurricane.
So many people saying, well, they should issue an apology. This is really insensitive, grossly insensitive, when people are actually still suffering, some people still in peril of drowning. As we heard from our reporters tonight, some waters are still rising in other areas. So this is far, from over.
It is far from over. There's still a lot of human suffering. There's no way that all of the television stations and networks reporting can give the full impact. They can show anecdotally some of the specific stories, but this is a world of great human suffering. And for these publications to treat these victims like toys, their playthings, objects of their derision, and frankly, I think just their insanity. It's embarrassing for the human race to think that there are people who claim to be educated, claim to be sophisticated, and this is what that means to them. But the good news? The good news, Kimberly, is that the people around America are bringing bottled water, they're bringing boats, they're reaching out, and instead of laughing at these victims, they're out there with their arms and legs in the water, helping those people get to safety. Give me those folks any day over a handful of left-wing idiots. And I think that's the comfort we all get from watching the heroic work of good, decent people who are doing heroic things in the midst of great danger.
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk about Politico, because the Politico cartoonist, he actually tried to defend his drawing because there was so much pushback against it. He said he was just mocking the secessionist movement and that it was not aimed at Texans. Do you think in any way that justifies what he did?
At least they had the good sense to pull it. Yeah, they should apologize for it, because it's still tasteless. It's tasteless while people are currently, this very moment, being rescued out of floodwaters to mean making fun of anybody who's in a floodwater. It's just beneath the dignity of anyone, except people who live in their nice little warm bubbles. They've never faced calamity, but I'll tell you something else they probably have never done. They've never gone out there and tried to rescue the people who are in calamity. And maybe if they could get off their high horse and get down in the water and go and rescue some desperate people, they might have a different idea about what's funny.
You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. And I even think of like Sergeant Perez putting it on the line, going to work to try to save a life, and he lost his, in these deadly floodwaters. This is still so much of a crisis tonight.
Welcome back to Hannity, University of Tampa. Visiting professor, assistant professor Kenneth Story is in hot water tonight after tweeting a very hateful message to Texans as Hurricane Harvey was pounding the Gulf Coast over the weekend. He wrote, quote, "I don't believe in instant karma, but this kind of feels like it for Texas." Now, hopefully, this will help them realize the GOP doesn't care about them. Ironically, he is now facing his own instant karma. According to reports, he was fired by the University of Tampa, and they have condemned his remarks. Story later apologized on Twitter, writing, quote, "I deeply regret a statement that I posted yesterday. I never meant to wish ill will upon any group. I hope all affected by Harvey recover quickly." Oh, that's so sincere. Tonight, it appears Mr. Story has deleted his Twitter account. Good idea. Joining us with reaction, Fox News contributor Mercedes Schlapp, New York State Senator. How did this ever happen? Democrat Brian Benjamin. How did that ever happen?
The people of Harlem, they love me.
All right, congratulations. I give you full credit. You went out, you campaigned hard, and I hope you serve your constituents well. You talk about a sewer in D.C., it's worse up in Albany, just in case you want to know.
That's true, we have problems.
How many of your leaders up there got indicted recently, over the years?
Since I've been elected, no one. I got elected on May 23rd, so no one yet.
We've seen a lot of hate. We've seen a lot of attacks tonight. And I want you as a Democrat to say, this is wrong and it's outrageous. I just want some Democrat to say it because I don't hear it enough.
This is wrong and it's outrageous. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Good for you.
But I think the environment is also outrageous. And I think some of the comments that the president makes leads to this kind of environment. And I think that's what's unfortunate.
You're blaming the president for what other people say. That's ridiculous.
No. I'm not blaming the president for what other people say. I'm blaming the president for what the president says. And I think,
fair enough.
He is our leader.
Hope that these waters recede a little bit quicker than they are so far, Jesse.
Unbelievable, Rick. Thank you very much. President Trump hasn't left Washington yet, but he's already getting criticism from the left for his trip to see Harvey victims in Texas and Louisiana tomorrow.
We all talked about how insensitive it was for him not to mention the victims in his first trip. Tomorrow should not be to remake or redo what he didn't do the first trip. Tomorrow he ought to say we're making immediate funding available. We're going to put FEMA people on the street to handle debris. He needs to come in with a proactive agenda rather than a makeup for the debacle he did the other day.
So that's the new narrative, Gutfeld, that he blew it on the first trip, and now this is a makeup trip. Is anybody believing that?
Well, you shouldn't believe anything from Sharpton. There are 5 words for him: shut up and go away. This is a guy who has lived his life about himself. One of the most self-serving hustlers of our time. He's the exact opposite of what you see in the streets of Houston and everywhere. It's funny. Traditional leftists like him are in malfunction mode. This is why you're seeing them now blame Trump for this or for that. They're trying to find a narrative that matches their grim worldview because Harvey has destroyed their worldview. There's no more division. There's no more bigotry. There's no more racism, conflict. All you're seeing 24/7 is unity, Americans all the time working together. So they go like, well, what can we do now? Let's go after Trump because that might work. Just another note about what Harvey has done, one of the positive things, offers a contrast to things like Twitter. Twitter encourages antagonism because it's not face-to-face interaction. So I can attack you or you because we never actually know each other. You can't find one example in Harvey coverage of negative human interaction. You can't find one because it's face-to-face. It's human. There's nothing good. There's no antagonism. And it shows you the contrast between why people have to talk to each other rather than tweet at each other.
And then also, very quickly, just to tack on to Greg's point, because I think you're absolutely right. And it's the difference between how you view human nature.
Yeah.
So if you view human beings as senseless and needy and incapable of thinking for themselves, and ultimately as bad people who, when they lose everything, then they will attack each other, you are a statist.
Yeah.
Leadership besides exploiting tragedy to try to get his face on TV.
I think that you're You know, it's interesting to watch you guys. You guys are so back on your heels on this empathy issue because...
No, actually, no, we're not.
Any president
That's also a manufactured.
I'm
on my high heels and I am
you can go, if you recall...
Well, did you want him to go into people's houses and cry? Did you want him to climb trees and rescue kittens?
No, you know what?
What does empathy do? Seriously,
Here's the thing, Kennedy. If you tweet epic...
You get him, Kennedy.
I was out there.
There's that interesting. Ostensibly, I'm kind of being all intellectual on that. This is what it's like with him there. Why do they have him on this show still? I could say this while they're being
It doesn't measure up to what other presidents did 9/11.
Can I know, but, okay.
Go ahead, Greg.
I said this yesterday, but
Get him, Greg.
President Trump's role in this is not that important because what you're seeing is a monumental shift in the narrative of this country. We have been immersed in identity politics for so long, and what we're seeing is a waking up. We are coming out of this horrible depression, and I think it's kind of monumental. I don't think Trump plays a huge factor in this. He didn't have to, because what you're seeing, if it's so important in Texas, you are seeing victims not acting like victims after years of people embracing victimology who aren't victims. In this case, you are seeing real victims just getting it done without acting like victims. We're seeing a monumental turnaround.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and people reclaiming their goodness.
Yeah.
And not being told that because they might have political differences, they have to hate each other,
right,
and they have to shout at each other, and they have to use fascist tactics in order to shut each other down. There is none of that here, and I think that's why the left is looking for something to manufacture in order to drive a wedge where there doesn't need to be.
The president also hasn't failed here, and that's why we're seeing the desperation of the left.
Dan Rather has been right fewer times than a stop clock. I don't think anybody's ever said that on television before, and I'm glad that I said it. For the Democrats and the media, the Russian story is their stress ball. You know, when they can't handle Trump, when Trump's doing well, things are happening, they have to squeeze the Russian story. Squeeze. But it's less effective than the stress ball because it builds no muscles. It's so funny to watch the Democrats who used to think the USSR were wonderful when they could destroy us. You know, now think they're okay when they're 1/8 the size. Yeah, I don't know. There are two roads to take here. Be like Dianne Feinstein and say, look, give the president a chance. You won't go crazy. Or cling to the Russian story. Think he's going to fantasize that he's going to be impeached every day. You're going to go and...